I can give one example of one of these quadrants, and this is the most extreme in which we will expect highest interaction is when, for example, in the COVID. At the beginning of the COVID, the uncertainty was huge. So companies, they didn't know how they could forecast the sales of their products because they didn't have enough data, right? Because we didn't collect any historical data about past pandemic at the level that we were affected by the COVID. So then the AI started, the forecasting systems based on AI started learning, but they didn't have enough anchor points to learn. So then some companies, they decided to put the expert, forecasters, the expert demand planners to start, making decisions, comparing their insights. So then what is going on in a certain region when they are locked down? Right, for the, academic staff, for when the schools start, right? So then, what are the anchor points that demand planners are using in order to make their predictions, even with all this uncertainty? So then, the forecasting AI systems started to include additional parameters in order to learn from these decisions that were made by the demand planning experts, right? And this is the way that the forecasting AI systems started to learn from this interaction, right? So the first point is that they recognized that they had to learn, right? That they had to feed up the AI system with different parameters that they didn't include in the past, right? They were not the regular parameters, other parameters, like for example, what is happening in different regions, right? What is gonna, what are the decisions that the governments are gonna make in terms of lockdowns in the, short period of time. Short period of time could be 1 week, 2 weeks, right? So they could include these trends, or then they could improve their forecasting decisions. So then they allow the system to learn from all these different parameters, and the vice versa, right? The demand planners are starting to capture patterns, new patterns from the short COVID periods, right? From different regions, not directly the regions for which they were for doing the forecast, other regions, in order to start learning what happened in other regions that could be similar in the region they wanted to forecast for, right? So then they started to learn also from the probability and the statistics behind of all these data available. It started to be, more broader, more geographical, dispersed, but also analyze new parameters that could interfere in the regular algorithms that they were implemented, and then they started learning from these new parameters. So this is the kind of interaction human and AI system. Just the first thing was to recognize the two sides could complement each other, right, in order to make a better work. But for this, something that we found is that, some companies, talking about COVID, right? So there are some companies that they realized that digital efforts were needed when COVID, happened, right? And then they start saying, okay, we need to be digitalized. And then it's great, yeah. All the society started to be more digital by, of course, we were forced to do that somehow. And so this is a good thing, that the society was more prepared to trust on data, to trust on the digital devices. But on the other side, there were some companies that even they implemented some technology, they invested in some technology, they were not really prepared to tackle all this complexity. Because it's not only a question of buying a certain technology and switch the device on and that's all, absolutely not. Then the organizations need to be prepared for this new language of data-driven in the decision making, of a structure their organizations based on, short-term cases that could be run with data. The organizations need to be prepared to explore new ways of making decisions or new ways of executing their processes based on data, right? The companies, organizations should be prepared to change depending on what they will find what the data will teach them. So this kind of preparation from the organization point of view is not obvious. This new way of, this new language that is purely data-driven is not obvious. And some companies were not ready for that. Even they had some technology, very good technology. They invested a huge amount of money, but maybe they were not prepared. Again, from the organizational point of view, the processes also need to change. The way of tackling, deploying processes is not the same that the more regular, traditional approach. So they need to change their processes. In some cases, we have been working with some companies, they had to redesign their supply chain process from scratch in order to be driven by data, right? So then, as I mentioned, when COVID happened, we found these two companies. Companies that, they started investing in technology, but they were not prepared from the organizational, strategically point of view, their culture as well. And also some companies that they started both approaches, the pure technology-oriented and data-driven, right? But also the organizational setting, right? And those companies then, they improve exponentially because they had a huge competitive advantage compared with these companies because all the context of the COVID, right, demanded more digital approaches. Right, so then it was interesting to observe what happened in front of the COVID. Yeah, unfortunately, of course, but from the research point of view, very, very interesting insights. Yeah, behind.